Okay, welcome everyone to the deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive, as always, into the world of black hat hackers.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm really excited about this one because I think, this is something that we all hear about, but maybe we don't always fully understand, who these folks are, what motivates them, what are they after, and also, what's the real impact of their actions.
Mhm.
And so I think we've got some really fascinating material to dig into today.
I'm excited to dig into it, yeah.
So, by the end of our time here today, um, our mission is really to equip everyone listening with a much sharper understanding of what are the threats out there and why are these activities so significant, especially in our digital world, which we all live in now.
Absolutely. You hear these terms thrown around all the time. Black hat, white hat. I mean, when we say black hat, like who are we even talking about? Black hat hackers are really individuals who are purposely, looking for these weaknesses in computer systems and then exploiting them.
Right.
And what sets them apart is their malicious intent, right? I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the cybersecurity professionals, the good guys, the white hat hackers, they're looking for those same vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
The difference is they're looking to fix them and make systems more secure, whereas a black hat is looking to exploit that.
So that's a really important distinction. I think you're right that a lot of people maybe don't even fully grasp that there's this constant back and forth, between the folks who are trying to make things more secure and those who are trying to exploit the weaknesses that are out there. So let's dig into the black hat side of things. What would you say, like, what really drives someone to become a black hat hacker? I mean, is it all about just like showing off their technical skills, or is
Yeah.
it something deeper?
I think it's rarely just about technical skills. There are a lot of people that are drawn to the puzzle solving aspect of it, the challenge, but ultimately the motivations, they cluster around a couple of key things.
Mm,
The first and most obvious is often personal gain.
mm,
And, personal gain in the digital realm often translates to financial rewards. That's kind of the stereotype of the hooded figure sitting in a basement somewhere trying to drain bank accounts.
right.
But, it goes beyond that too, right? I mean, it can also extend to gaining power or influence.
Yeah.
Some of these black hats really do have that desire for recognition within certain communities or even on a larger geopolitical scale.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the intention to cause harm, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's, sabotaging a company or disrupting essential services, the ones we rely on, or even engaging in attacks that have political aims.
So it sounds like it's a really diverse landscape,
Hmm.
in terms of who these actors are, what motivates them. Um, I mean, I think about, is it someone, like you said, sort of a lone wolf operating, from their basement or a bedroom somewhere? Or are we talking about these highly organized groups that we hear about sometimes, maybe even backed by certain countries? I mean, like, what's the reality there?
You're absolutely right. It's both. The spectrum is really, really broad. You'll have highly skilled individuals working completely on their own.
Right.
And then you have on the other end of the spectrum these well-resourced, very organized groups.
Yeah.
Sometimes, they are suspected of having state backing and they are capable of orchestrating some incredibly sophisticated attacks.
And I would imagine that, the motivations we talked about, the financial gain, the sort of the desire for notoriety within certain circles, and then just the wanting to cause trouble. I would think that those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
You could have someone who's driven by kind of a mixture of those factors, right?
Precisely. Yeah. I mean, a group might launch ransomware attacks primarily because they want to make money.
Yeah.
But, maybe the scale of that attack or who they target might also be geared towards disrupting a particular industry.
Yeah.
Or even a government, which of course then elevates their profile,
Yeah.
and helps them achieve some broader objectives that might not be purely financial.
So I think we're starting to get a basic understanding of who these actors are and what makes them tick.
Yeah.
But, to really understand the potential impact on you and me, on our lives, I think we need to look at real world examples.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into some of the more significant events that have really, I think, brought this issue to the forefront. And maybe we can start by looking at the WannaCry ransomware attack back in 2017.
Yeah.
I think that was a moment that really, brought home the potential for massive disruption.
Yeah, it really did.
And I think, as we all remember, it was a cyber attack that really went global. But do you remember who was believed to be behind it?
The attack has been attributed to the Lazarus Group, and they have known links to North Korea.
Okay.
And what's particularly interesting here is the vulnerability that they exploited, a flaw in Microsoft Windows called Eternal Blue.
Eternal Blue. Okay.
Now this wasn't some brand new, just discovered vulnerability. It was something that the NSA, the National Security Agency, had actually identified, and it was subsequently leaked.
Oh wow.
So essentially, this exploit, something that a government agency had developed,
right,
essentially became a weapon that these black hat hackers could then use.
Yeah. So they took this leaked exploit, Eternal Blue, and they were able to use that to basically spread their ransomware. So, for folks listening who might not be, deeply familiar with ransomware,
Yeah.
Paint a picture of what is that? Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I mean, imagine a digital padlock suddenly clamping down on all your important documents.
Okay.
Your family photos, your everything on your computer. And the only key to unlock it is held by the attackers, who demand a ransom payment, usually in a cryptocurrency that's very difficult to trace.
Right.
And that's essentially what happened in the WannaCry attack.
And the scale of this was just enormous, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Right.
over 230,000 computers across over 150 countries. I mean, it was truly, truly global. And
Yeah.
and beyond just the sheer number of machines that were impacted,
Yeah.
it was the impact on critical services that was really, really concerning.
Right. And we're talking about things like hospitals, right? I mean, that's the image that really, sticks in my mind from that event.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the UK's National Health Service, the NHS, was hit particularly hard.
Yeah.
And you think about it, you had appointments that had to be canceled, surgeries that were postponed, patients had to be diverted to different hospitals because the medical records that were needed
Yeah.
were completely inaccessible.
Right.
This wasn't just some abstract data being lost.
Yeah.
This had immediate and severe consequences.
On people's health and well-being.
Exactly.
I mean, it's chilling to think about, the direct impact that something like this can have on individuals, people who are just, trying to go about their lives, to get the health care that they need. And the financial costs globally were also significant.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, estimates put the total global damage around $4 billion.
Wow.
But I think the key takeaway, isn't just the financial loss.
Yeah.
But it's really that, WannaCry demonstrated that these black hat hackers, they can cripple essential infrastructure.
Right.
That our societies that we depend on. And that's a threat that goes way beyond just stealing money.
Right. It's almost like they're able to move from the digital world into the physical world in a way.
Yeah. And have very tangible real world consequences for all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another significant event. This was the Sony Pictures hack back in 2014.
Yeah.
And I think this one was really interesting because it felt very different in terms of what the underlying reasons were, for that particular attack.
It really did. Sony Pictures was attributed to a group calling itself the Guardians of Peace.
Okay.
And it's widely believed that they had ties to North Korea.
Okay.
And it appears that the primary motivation behind this hack was retaliation for the movie, The Interview.
Okay.
Which was a satirical take on North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un.
So in this case, it wasn't necessarily about financial gain. It was about making a statement.
Yeah.
It was about censorship or
Yeah.
trying to make some kind of political point.
Exactly. And the methods they employed were pretty destructive.
Yeah.
They didn't just steal data.
Mm-hmm.
They released a ton of sensitive information publicly, emails between executives, private conversations between employees, unreleased films.
I mean, it felt so invasive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a huge breach of privacy for all the people involved.
Hmm.
And I remember hearing that they didn't just, copy the data, but they actually did a lot of damage to Sony's internal computer systems.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, reports indicated that their internal systems were essentially wiped clean,
Wow.
with data being scrambled, just rendered unusable.
Right.
The recovery process for Sony was extensive and really expensive. Cost them millions of dollars.
And beyond the damage to the company itself, I mean, there was a huge impact on the individual employees.
Absolutely. Yeah, personal information of Sony employees, social security numbers,
Right.
home addresses, salaries. It was all leaked online. And this obviously had a really profound impact on their privacy and security.
Right.
Exposed them to identity theft and all sorts of other potential harm.
It's a real illustration of how these attacks can have like a really wide-reaching impact.
Yeah.
That goes beyond just the target, the corporation itself.
Right.
But ripples out to all the individuals who work there and whose lives are touched by that company. And it definitely raises questions about, how should organizations be protecting this data?
Yeah.
And what are their responsibilities for safeguarding that personal information?
Absolutely. I think the Sony hack really, really served as a reminder that black hat hackers, they can have these significant political motivations.
Right.
And that the resulting damage can go far beyond just financial losses. It forces us to consider, really what are the responsibilities surrounding data security in this digital age.
So we've looked at, attacks that were driven by financial aims, by political aims, but let's explore now this whole realm of hacktivism.
Yeah.
And I think a well-known example of that is the group Anonymous.
Right.
And this is where I think it starts to get a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
I think, depending on your perspective, hacktivism can be seen as, something that's heroic or something that's villainous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it digital activism or is it just cyber crime?
I think that's a really good way to put it. Hacktivists they're certainly a unique category. They're driven by political or social causes.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, there are differing viewpoints on their actions. Are they digital warriors fighting for some noble ideal, or are they just criminals?
Right.
And Anonymous is probably the most recognizable example of this decentralized, loosely organized group.
Yeah, I mean they're kind of the poster child, aren't they, for hacktivism?
Oh.
And they've targeted such a diverse range of organizations. I mean, from government bodies to corporations to religious institutions.
Absolutely.
And often in response to perceived injustices.
Right.
Or in support of particular causes that they believe in.
Yeah.
And I think their Operation Payback campaign back in 2010 is a good example of this kind of activity.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the trigger was for that particular campaign?
Yeah, so Operation Payback was really launched in response to a handful of companies.
Okay.
Including PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard. They decided to cut off financial services to WikiLeaks.
Right.
After the organization released a large collection of classified U.S. government documents. So Anonymous viewed this as an attack on free information, on freedom of the press.
Yeah.
And so they launched their campaign in retaliation.
And their primary attack method in that particular campaign, if I remember correctly, was DDoS attacks.
Yes, that's correct. It stands for distributed denial of service attacks.
Yeah.
And what that means, is imagine you have a website or a server.
Right.
And suddenly it's being overwhelmed by this flood of internet traffic.
Right.
Making it so overloaded that legitimate users like you and me trying to access the site just can't get through.
It's like a digital traffic jam, basically.
Exactly.
Where they're intentionally clogging up the works.
Right.
So it's interesting because, the underlying motivation might have been, political or ideological.
Right.
But the actions that were taken, were still disruptive and illegal and caused, significant problems for the companies that were targeted.
Absolutely. I mean, they cause significant disruption to their online services, and a lot of financial costs for those companies to try to mitigate these attacks.
Right.
And so it really highlights this point that even when it's driven by these political motivations, hacktivism, it still is a form of cybercrime.
Yeah.
And it really does blur the lines, I think,
Right.
between activism and hacking, and it can have, these real world consequences
Yeah.
for the people on the receiving end.
Okay. So, we've talked about attacks that are financially motivated, politically motivated, ideologically motivated, through hacktivism. I mean, it seems like, regardless of the motive, the methods that are employed by black hat hackers can have these really serious repercussions. For individuals, for organizations, for society as a whole. But let's kind of bring it down to the individual level for a minute and talk about, phishing attacks and maybe we can, highlight this with the example of the Yahoo data breach.
Yeah.
This really shows how even these seemingly simple tactics can have these huge consequences.
Absolutely. And we often focus on these large scale attacks against, corporations and governments, but it is important for everyone listening to remember that, individuals, you are very frequent targets as well.
Right.
And phishing is really common. It's often a very effective tactic that these black hats use.
Yeah.
To target individuals.
So, for anyone listening who might not be familiar with the term, I mean, how does a typical phishing attack work?
Well, basically, it involves sending out these deceptive emails or text messages or other types of communication that are designed to look like they're coming from legitimate sources.
Like your bank or a social media platform or an online retailer you use.
Right.
And they'll often try to trick you into, clicking on these malicious links that might lead to fake websites designed to steal your login credentials.
Right.
Or other personal information like your passwords, your credit card details.
Yeah.
Or even your social security number.
Right.
And the Yahoo data breach back in 2014 really, really illustrates the scale of damage that can result from this.
Yeah.
I mean, while the initial attack method, isn't always publicly detailed.
Right.
The 2014 Yahoo breach resulted in the theft of data from over 500 million users.
I mean, it's just mind-boggling the number of people who were impacted by that.
It's huge, absolutely.
And this included, email addresses, phone numbers, birth dates,
right?
And even the security questions and answers that people use for account recovery.
Exactly. And this breach was attributed to a group of Russian hackers.
That's right. Yeah.
Which really shows the global nature of this.
Absolutely.
It's not limited to any one country or region.
Right.
And this remains one of the largest data breaches in history, and it really highlights the potential impact on individuals when their information falls into the wrong hands.
It can be used for anything, from identity theft and financial losses to just that sense of violation of privacy and security.
Right. That somebody has, access to things that you thought were private and secure.
Exactly.
And it's a reminder that these black hat hackers, they don't always need to, do these really complex, incredibly sophisticated things.
Right.
Sometimes just these simple methods that target individuals can yield, huge amounts of valuable data.
That's right. And I think it really does emphasize for everyone just how important individual vigilance is.
Yeah.
Against this constant threat.
So it does make you wonder, though, we've been talking about the bad guys for so long.
Right.
It does make you wonder, are there good guys out there?
Yeah.
Who are actively fighting against this?
Absolutely. And I think you should think of it as this constant, back and forth.
Right.
In the cyber world.
Right.
The white hat hackers, the good guys, they're out there and they're playing this vital role in in defending against black hat activities. They're proactively looking for these vulnerabilities, in systems and software. They're developing security tools and strategies, and they're working really hard to protect individuals and organizations from becoming victims.
So for our listeners out there, I mean, what can we do? What are some of the key takeaways in terms of, protecting ourselves from these threats that we've been talking about?
Well, vigilance is key,
Okay.
and this means, making sure you're using strong, unique passwords
Okay.
for all your different online accounts.
Right.
Be really cautious about clicking on links or opening attachments in emails that seem even the slightest bit suspicious.
Right.
And make sure that all your software is up to date.
Yeah.
I mean, your operating system, your web browser, your antivirus programs.
Yeah.
These updates often include security patches that can protect you against known vulnerabilities that these black hats are trying to exploit.
So it's almost like, practicing good digital hygiene.
Exactly.
It's really just being careful, being aware. Not clicking on things that you're not sure about.
Yeah.
So just to kind of quickly recap, our deep dive today, we've seen that black hat hackers, they're a really diverse group, with a range of motivations.
Yeah.
They're capable of launching attacks that can disrupt, critical infrastructure. They can steal huge amounts of personal data. They can make political statements.
Right.
All with real world consequences.
Yeah.
Their actions have a tangible impact on individuals, on businesses, on society as a whole.
I think that's a really concise and accurate summary.
Yeah.
We looked at several, really important examples.
Yeah.
WannaCry, the Sony Pictures hack, Anonymous, the Yahoo breach.
Right.
And I think each of those really illustrates a different facet of the threats that we face in this digital landscape.
Well, as we wrap up today, it leaves me with a thought for everyone listening. Considering the increasing sophistication and the diverse motivations that we've talked about today, what do you think are the responsibilities of both individuals and organizations in safeguarding our digital future?
It's a really good question, and it's something that I think we all need to be thinking about, as we move forward.
Yeah, it's a question that doesn't have an easy answer.
Right.
But it's one that I think we all need to be, grappling with.
Absolutely.
As we navigate this, increasingly complex world.
It's an ongoing challenge, and it requires, ongoing awareness, constant adaptation to new threats.
Yeah.
And really, it's a shared responsibility. Right. I mean, both individuals and organizations, I think, have a role to play in creating a more secure, digital environment for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
It's not just up to the experts. It's not just up to the companies. It's really up to all of us.
Exactly.
So thanks for joining us today on the Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And we hope you'll join us again next time as we take another deep dive into some fascinating topic.
Absolutely.
We'll see you then.